Yes, white men get the short end of the stick, and an article this week has the numbers to prove it. In The Lost Generation, Jacob Savage writes about the countless white men who tried to get a start in prestige professions but were kicked in the teeth in the name of diversity. There have been anti-white race preferences since the 1960s, but he picks 2014 as the year the doors slammed shut. If you were 40 that year, you were already a success, if you were ever going to be. But if you were 30 in 2014, your chances were close to zero. 2014 was the year of Oscars So White. Only white people were nominated for acting awards, and the word went out to Hollywood talent agencies. Want female and diverse, emphasis on African American. As Mr. Savage writes, this was systematic discrimination, documented in writing, implemented without consequence. It's striking how casual it all was. The author writes that in 2011, when he moved to Los Angeles to be a screenwriter, 48% of the lower-level TV writers were white men. 13 years later, it was just 11.9%. It was the same in print media. In 9 years, from 2013 to 2022, the staff at Vox went from 82% men to just 37%. Whites dropped from 88% to 59%. This year, 73% of the editors are women. In 2020, the psychotic racial reckoning after George Floyd went to his reward made everything worse. Since then, nearly two-thirds of the Atlantic's hires have been women, and nearly half have been non-white. In 2024, the magazine bragged that in the previous year, 3/4 of the writers it hired were women, and 69% were BIPOCs. Since 2020, only 7.7% of LA Times interns have been white men. In 2021, 78% of the new hires at NPR were non-white. Of the 220 fellows the New York Times recruited since 2018, only 10% were white men. Universities are the same. White men line up for teaching jobs, but are elbowed aside at every stage. Hiring committees talk openly about it. Of all the tenure-track assistant professors Yale has hired since 2018, only 14.6% have been white American men. In the humanities, just 7.9%. Europeans sometimes get a pass, and it's a great leg up for a white to be homosexual or to have a non-white partner. Since 2022, Brown has hired 45 tenure-track professors in the humanities and social sciences. Just 3 were white American men. Mr. Savage's article is stuffed with numbers like this, and it's the same everywhere. Corporate jobs, book publishing, literary awards, young artists' showcases at museums, and of course, the MacArthur Genius Grants. In 2023, just for fun, I calculated that a black woman was 15 times more likely than a white man to be a genius. Mr. Savage doesn't even mention Joe Biden's rabid DEI push that ordered every part of the government to come up with an equity action plan, which loaded the dice against white men. The plans all had to be approved by Shalanda Young, who was running the Office of Management and Budget. Mr. Savage is Jewish, but he doesn't count how many of the rare white men who managed to be hired are Jewish. To go back to the Atlantic, the answer is clearly a lot. If you find a name like Fallows or Murphy, he's an older guy who got in before the vice closed quite so viciously. Young wasps, the kind of men who founded and built the country, good luck finding any of them. You can imagine the man-bun white males who, as Mr. Savage notes, probably had to mouth anti-white allyship to get their jobs. He quotes a journalist. "I always thought I was an effeminate nerd growing up, but my way of expressing myself now puts me on the most masculine end of men in media." Clone this wimp a million times, mix in swarms of feminists, non-whites, and homosexuals. And now you have the people who write the news, teach your children, publish books, make movies and TV, and crank out what passes for culture. How could advertising not be full of happy blonde women having children with black men? Even aside from the racial angle, hiring all these women is insane. They don't want to marry the men left on the shelf. And when they eventually settle for a podcaster or Bitcoin trader, they may be too old to have children. What could be sadder than this photo of 3 beers and a coloring book on a table in a bar? St. Paul Kate writes, "Life as a childless woman in my 30s, living in downtown St. Paul, truly unbearable. Please, someone rescue me from this utter misery." It doesn't help that she flies the homo flag, promotes feminism, Democratic Socialists of America, and is an anti-racist. America wrecked her life too. Jacob Savage could be right. Millennial white men may have faced the nastiest job market since the Depression. They were eager young liberals, determined not to be racists like their fathers, thinking they were on the right side of history. This was going to be the brave, new, multiracial meritocracy, and it shoved them straight to the back of the bus. But they won't stand up for themselves. Every one of Mr. Savage's sources is anonymous. Mr. Savage himself is all dreary resignation. Not even any surprise, much less fury, that a country founded and built by white men has been so viciously perverted. And once an institution is drenched in estrogen and melanin, and the white men who manage to get in are effeminate nerds, what's the chance of going back? At Yale, 2.3% of the faculty are Republicans. How can Yale possibly hire anyone who thinks straight about anything? Earlier this year, a group of Harvard students invited me to give a private talk. They told me about the constant, sickening, even gloating anti-white man atmosphere at Harvard. I asked if they had even the slightest affection for the oldest, most prestigious university in the country. Well, they weren't effeminate nerds. No was the answer. Burn it down. We're not going to get a meritocracy. Whatever we get will be multiracial, which means a slow death. It used to be a pretty good country, but my generation and the one before drove it right onto the rocks. Gibbering about reform means going down with a ship. We need to start over, whatever that means and whatever it takes. Maybe Mr. Savage will live up to his name and start fighting.